Assassin's Creed is one of the biggest cross-media franchises in gaming. But if the internet is to be believed, it's also one of the most divisive. Ever since its troubled birth, it's been derided for being repetitive and boring, and not having much at all to do with assassination. Despite all this, it's shifted over 70 million units and is the biggest IP in Ubisoft's history, and they're doing no bad, so the games must be doing something right. Personally, I love Assassin's Creed. I'm there on launch day every time they bring a new one out. I'm always eager to see what happens next in the eternal war between the story's two ideologically opposed factions. So in the spirit of that tribalism, and because I'm a massive prick, I've decided to take 10 of the most common complaints about Assassin's Creed games and publicly disagree with them.
So what I want you to do, Jim, is I want you to make a video about Assassin's Creed and why everyone's wrong about it. So all these reasons, I want you to tell them why they're wrong. Can you do that? Is that alright?
It's kind of like a heel turn though.
Yeah, it is a little bit, but to be honest, Jim, people are quite fond of you, they like you quite a lot, and quite frankly, I'm sick of it.
I don't like Danny Wallace.
Oh, he's not that bad.
Yesterday was dark and dingy. My temperament was rather whingy.
How can you not like Danny Wallace? The boy's harmless, especially in the context of him as a voice actor. In Assassin's Creed, he isn't trying to declare his London flat an independent nation or providing the inspiration for terrible Jim Carrey vehicles. He's playing an English guy who's a bit of a prick, and he does it perfectly well. Besides, Alan Rickman, Jeremy Irons and Charles Dance have made careers out of basically playing English guys who are pricks, and everyone loves them for it, so there's nothing wrong with pricks. Not even ones played by Danny Wallace.
But Jim, it's not even historically accurate.
I can't believe this is a problem for some people, but it did come up while canvassing social media that Assassin's Creed plays too fast and too loose with historical fact. The contention is understandable. When something is marketed heavily on its historical setting, on how much attention to detail it's paid to the era being depicted, one can be forgiven for getting hung up on how true to reality it is. One of the more egregious abuses of artistic license is in the sheer number of historical personalities you come across in the series. An unlikely roster that features everyone from Machiavelli and Da Vinci to Pope Alexander VI, from George Washington to Blackbeard, and that's just a small selection of the bigger ones you encounter. Thing is, yeah, it's unrealistic that all these people would have parts to play in the same story, but the backdrop to all this is a plot about two ancient orders fighting a secret war while pulling strings behind every government, council and royal court in the history of mankind. It's already pretty far-fetched to start with. And if you're not on board with that core concept from the start, then you're not going to be on board with anything that stems from it. To compare like for like with another medium, let's look at the BBC series I, Claudius. I, Claudius, a landmark historical drama loved by critics and generally regarded as one of the finest pieces of television ever made. And it's absolutely brilliant. Now, it depicts the early Roman Empire and the success of the Julio-Claudian dynasty as being almost entirely shaped by the machinations of one character, Livia, or Julia Augusta, the wife of Augustus, who is shown to have had a hand in the death of every major player in the imperial court, ensuring her son Tiberius's ascension to the throne, right after she, of course, offs the Caesar himself. Trouble is, it's all a load of shite. Livia's reputation as the wicked stepmother of the Roman Empire has barely any basis in recorded history. It just makes for a great story, and that's the only thing that matters, or that should matter, to an audience. They understood this in the 70s. Surely, in 2014, we as a society are at a stage where it should just be accepted that historical drama is not supposed to be where you get your facts from. Assassin's Creed distorts and embellishes and generally rides roughshod over the history books in order to craft a tale of cloak and dagger conspiracy that spans centuries, and it's all the better for it. Which brings me to...
The story. The story is so stupid. History and science fiction, aliens and virtual reality. What a load of bloody nonsense.
Throughout the series, we see the history of civilization through the eyes of a modern-day protagonist, who is in turn seeing it through the eyes of its fictional participants, making Assassin's Creed itself the perfect allegory of the very thing it is. holding a mirror to the trials we've always faced and continue to face as a species, ones of our own making such as the struggles of conflict and tribalism, the clashing of faiths and nations, and external ones, natural disasters, extinction events, the very eternal danger of Mother Nature throwing a mad fit and punting something right at our planet. It takes all these things that have shaped our world in one way or another and makes a sort of sense of them in the context of men who stab other men. All that to me is utterly brilliant and not at all stupid, bloated and somewhat impenetrable maybe, but considering the scope of the tale, I find it difficult to imagine a way in which it can exist without becoming bloated and somewhat impenetrable. The story of the Assassin's Creed universe makes perfect sense within its own warped boundaries, and that's all it needs to do. It's not that, I promised my dad I'd champion indies, you know.
Hang on a minute. Where is feudal Japan?
Since the first game, there's been an open debate about where the next game should be set. The four most desired environments are feudal Japan, World War II, Egypt, and Victorian London. Alright, it's fun to speculate and it's fun to imagine what could be, but rather than have them use a setting I'd like to see, I prefer to have locales that serve the narrative and gameplay over ones which sound cool on paper. Ironically, I think the third game in the series demonstrates this rather well. The American War of Independence is an incredibly interesting period of history. The founding of what would become the most powerful nation on Earth, the rejection of the British crown at a time when the Empire was at its height. Seems perfect for an Assassin's Creed game, but in practice, fuck me, it was dull. Parkouring your way through New York becomes a lot less enticing if you're talking about a New York which is little more than a church and a couple of pubs. And the protagonist of AC3, can't you mind his name, not Ezio, felt like such a passive entity in the proceedings that there was a sense, perhaps, that such a recent and crystallised period of history is not the best fit for the series. So I'd argue that the lack of feudal Japan in Assassin's Creed games is not a misstep or a glaring omission, but simply a reflection of the fact that these creative decisions are being made carefully and with wider considerations than what people in message boards think is best. And it's not something they can take lightly. If they make a bad call on the location, they run the risk of putting out a stinker, and they did. Also, World War II, fucking sit down.
But Ubisoft is milking the series. There are so many yearly sequels.
That Mad Men's a load of shite, innit? They make a season of that every year. I wish they'd stop milking it so much. Away to fuck. Alright, is that the megabus? Aye, I need a ticket back to Edinburgh.
The combat is bloody awful, and I'll tell you what, it's too easy.
The swordplay has always been a bit basic, but I'd argue it has plenty of variety. Each enemy type actually requires different tactics to deal with effectively. The different weapons and tools available enable a wide range of tactics. You can use the environment to your advantage, and changing how you approach each battle can make a huge difference to how it plays out. Sure, you can get through most fights through button bashing, but you won't feel any satisfaction, and it will take you ages to dispatch the most feeble opposition. It's very much a system that you get more out of the more you put into it. It's just balanced in such a way that you can, if you like, completely ignore its intricacies and yawn your way through a fight. Personally, I find the combat rewarding some of the time and just perfectly functional most of the time. There's never been a moment where I've thought it's actually bad.
The stealth doesn't work. For a start, where's the crouch button?
Stealth has never been the series' strong point, certainly not in comparison to actual stealth games, but I think that comes from a slavish focus on the part of the titular Assassin's Creed which says, hide in plain sight, let the people mask you. The stealth system is geared toward reflecting that, and as such doesn't even have a crouch button, but it works alright, and again it's something which makes perfect sense in the context of the universe.
Jim, I am so bored of Assassins and Templars.
But that's what it's about. That's like saying Star Trek's fuck because you're no into spaceships and moralising.
Ah, the controls, really awkward.
You're awkward.
But Desmond is a total cockend.
Hey, what's the matter you, Altair?
That's racist.
You're racist.
He is a cockend, aye.
Simon, come on, man.
You know the rules.
Dude, this is...
You know the rules.
This is a joke, right?
Get in.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
Get in there.
Simon? I'm hungry.